My name is Carlie. I was kindly invited by Naomi and the panel to chair this session, which as a non-Indigenous researcher, I am working primarily in First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. I'm personally very excited to hear about and unlearn some of the ways of working with communities and the general research principles and some really good insights I'm hoping from you two. So it's going to be a very exciting panel. Now look, as Naomi said, this is a safe space, but as Andrea said, there may be times where there could be a little bit of uncomfortability, there could be a little bit of, not high tension, but maybe it's not sitting well, feeling a little, things may be resonating or not resonating with you, and that's okay. As long as we feel safe together to have some honest but respectful conversations. And I'm sure our two panellists will not be holding back in how they feel, in what they want to say, but are also very mindful as well of how the audience might be. So I do invite you to remember the didgeridoo, remember where you are, take a breath, and really try and lean in and enjoy the session. So I'd like to... Oh, that's me. My face is far too huge. And that was before I fell over and ran into a lawnmower. The haircut, that was slightly graphic. My humour's a bit dodgy. So I would like to introduce one of our first panellists. You a panel or your speakers, presenters, awesome knowledge sharers, is Naomi Sunderland. Now, Naomi and I haven't known each other for too long, but I'm the director of the Griffith Institute for Human and Environmental Resilience, predominantly in the sciences group, but we've got members across all groups. And Naomi and I think we forged quite a nice little relationship early on when we were both very much around transdisciplinary, how we can have those research conversations and outputs and outcomes in not just the traditional, for me, the science way, but also across arts as well. So Naomi, you are a proud descendant of the Wurundjeri First Nations people of Australia, and alongside your mixed European heritage. But you know that, I don't need to tell you, that's Naomi. So you have Naomi has an expansive research and publishing record in arts health. She's won a number of awards. She's very well credentialed, very well respected in this space, particularly around using collective music for healing on country and for people in communities that really will very much benefit from that, I think. And you are Naomi is an invited honorary member of the Queensland Academy of Arts and Sciences, so that's very impressive. So we're very lucky to have Naomi. And Brydie is the Deputy Director of Research at the Queensland Conservatorium. See, that's my sciences.
Don't try and read.
I don't say conservatorium. I'm not going to read it all. But these are the important ones, and the Deputy Director of the Creative Arts Institute. Your impact is far-reaching from academia to remote Australian communities and international networks across the globe, and I know that because I've been reading that a little bit as well. So I'm actually really excited to be introducing these two. So I'll leave it with you to start the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cara.
Okay.
Thank you. So, hello again, everyone, and welcome to the next section of today. And so, Brydie and I have been working together since 2012, and we might start with a bit of our story, like how that came about and who we are together and apart. But just a reminder, following on from what Cara said, that please exercise self-sovereignty today. Like, if you are feeling a little bit unsettled or you've just got a sore back or whatever, you don't need to sit there stuck. Please hop up, move, stretch, take a little break. We've got so much art material here at the front. If you're a person who likes to doodle, who likes to write words, whatever, feel free to come and self-serve to that. And Brydie has brought in some beautiful lemon myrtle leaves from her garden, and that's also a fantastic way just to self-soothe, is to crack one of those leaves and just sit there and smell it. So we might pass some of those bunches around and invite you all to take a leaf and just crack it. But we've got sort of 3 stages of what we'd like to do before lunch together. We're going to try and resource you a bit, and this is very much something that Carlie and Brydie and I work together on, is this idea of research as wellbeing. And then we've got some fabulous storytelling coming your way. And this is not something just for CARI members. This is for everyone. We are all creative. We'll guide you through that when we get there. And then some actual, real action steps and accountability steps. And that's something when we've done a lot of consultation for this series. And one thing that a legendary First Nations artist and researcher here at Griffith said to me is, if this is just another talk fest, I don't want to do it. But if this is about genuine action planning and accountability, and in 24 months we want to be here together, and in 12 months we want to be here together, and then 24 months, I'm in. Okay, so that's why we're sort of trying to have this all in group accountability, and also group actions that we can go away and start working on together. So did you want to say anything else before we launch?
That sounds wonderful. It's lovely watching people crush and smell and just enjoy the aroma.
Yeah. Can you start us off on our story? How did it all begin, Brydie?
Well, I can tell you it's an incredible blessing to have Naomi as a sister and a companion, and to have the pleasure of being able to walk alongside someone for a really long period of time. And you can see by the pictures on screen, of course, we haven't aged a scrap. Your hair colour hasn't changed. My face shape hasn't changed. We've been through a lot of life together. And I remember the very first time I met Naomi, she actually came for a job interview. And there were 2 things I noticed about her. A, she was very serious, later because I think she wanted the job. And B, she had impeccable style. She had this amazing handbag. I've never seen you use a handbag ever since that moment, so many years ago. But I was just struck by this amazing spirit who came into the room. And it was almost like the ancestors were just playing with us and said, you two have some work to do together. And we didn't know what was ahead of us. We had no idea we were going to be sitting here however many years later, older, middle-aged ladies, and have had the experiences that we have had. But I will never forget that moment when I met you. And I really like to think of how the universe was kind of conspiring for us to actually do some work together.
Thank you, Bea. So over time, when I talk about Brydie now, I say she's my sister, she's my colleague, and she's my friend. And it is over that we've had the luxury, we really haven't stopped working together. We've had projects, we swap being each other's boss, it's all part of a very deep relationship that's emerged over time and that we share with many other people now. I remember the interview as well because I was working in health, so social work and human services, so social sides of health and wellbeing and healing. And I just had this thing in my life where, I've always been a singer. I've always, not always been a songwriter, but for a very long time. And I learnt music, I like to say, at my dad's knee, it was in the family, it was in the community, and everyone could have a go. That's how I started in music. And so I got to a point in my life, in my professional life, where I wasn't having any sort of access to that day to day. We had a mortgage and I was, pulling the plough to pay the mortgage. And I just said, I've got to get music back in my life. And I talked to a dear friend of ours, a mutual friend, Steve Dillon, who's a community music legend and worked so much with Andrew Brown at QCAD. And then he just sent me this ad that Brydie had put together for a project taking music students out to Tennant Creek to do arts-based service learning. He said, Bridie's amazing, why don't you go for this job? And it was a part-time research fellow job. And I went to the interview and I said to the director of the conservatorium at the time, Halp Skippers, I just, I need to have music back in my life. I've got all these research skills I can bring to the project, blah, 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 but I don't read music. And he goes, well, that's fine because I don't either. And I went, what? And he goes, but she does. So, we've had this really interesting, musical relationship, as well as, and all the barriers to entry for people and in communities and navigating that. And, it's been an epic musical and cultural journey, as well as research and careers and families and everything else. So, I really am very blessed to have Bridie and her unwavering support. And you don't meet many people like Bridie. So, I have Wiradjuri First Nations heritage, and that's a big story in and of itself. And Bridie is one of the fiercest and most consistent and most humble accomplices and allies that I've worked with. And I've learned a lot from Bridie in her unwavering commitment to community partners, and just the way she slows down, and if things aren't going right, she will step in. The courage that she displays is extraordinary. So a lot of that, now we're starting to write about it. We're starting to write about methodology, and we've got some papers under review, and some of that we'll share today, and some of it we can share after the workshop today as well with you all. And we'd love to hear your stories, because it's not just about our stories here, but we're just sort of a stimulus to get you going. Anything else you want to say on that?
Well, now I feel like I've got to say all these nice things about you, otherwise the balance is not right. But we don't have a lot of time, and I could say a lot of things about the phenomenal leader that Naomi is, and how when you are in her presence, it really seeps into you in the best possible way. It resonates within you, and she's a person who encourages you to step up and to be the best that you can possibly be. She has this look on her face where I'm like, I've missed the mark again. I've got to, because she has such incredible values. She embodies everything that she's researching, and comes from such a deep knowledge and place and connectedness to herself. And we've, I think, all been on healing journeys, discovering our own identities since we've known each other, and it's just been a blessing to walk alongside someone who generously shares that healing process with you. And I think you're all getting a beautiful taste of that, I hope, today as well. So I could probably go on, but we do need to really carefully time weave. And I think what we've wanted to do here is just privilege that relationality at the very beginning, because it's actually at the core and heart of everything that we're about to resource you with now.
Thank you. And I didn't ask her to say that. But and I remember one trip we were going together to Tennant Creek, and it was going to be a little bit hard. It was going to be a complex trip. There was some interesting dynamics before we even left here. And I remember, we were feeling a bit nervous, and I just want to acknowledge that too. But I remember sort of jokingly saying to Bridie, do you want to hold hands? And she was like, yes, please. And we go, okay, we hold hands. And that's what we said to each other yesterday as well. Do you want to hold hands? Yeah. Okay, we're in it together. And that's really something we're modelling in this whole series as well, is we've done this together. First Nations staff, HDR candidates, non-Indigenous staff, HDR candidates, we've really deliberately shared the load. And Jen has stepped up in the most amazing way today to model that as well. So all kudos to you and Cara and everyone else involved. But our key provocation for our session this morning is your research as it is now designed to extract or heal? And I realise we're deliberately creating a binary there. It could be both. And if we say, is our research at Griffith University, or is our research in our school, or our research in our team, or our research centre or institute, is it predominantly designed to extract, or is it designed to heal? And is that fit for purpose in this day and age? So Carlie had wrote down some beautiful notes, so we're going to refer backwards and forwards to her as we go. So Carlie wrote, for many First Nations people, research has often been something done to us rather than with us. It has extracted stories, data, knowledge and labour, while often leaving communities carrying the emotional, cultural and relational cost. And sometimes that extraction happens with a smile on its face and a temporary relationship and maybe at some degree of reciprocity, and then those researchers are never to be seen again. And so part of the provocation today and the invitation into the space, not just to today but over the next 24 months and beyond, is what happens when we reimagine research as something that can nourish rather than deplete? And what if research itself became a healing, relational, well-being practice? Okay? So the research process itself can lead us on a journey of healing, individually, together, that results in well-being. Yeah. And when we talk about this, it's, we're locating ourselves in that transformative research paradigm. And it really is about, we use the work of Mertens to underpin this, it's not just transformative and well-being for the people we're working with maybe outside the university and communities, it's for the researchers as well. And while that might not, in terms of our relative privilege, it might not be our primary aim. Our primary aim is with the communities that they're having an incredible positive experience as best as we can co-facilitate that. But, as Brydie said, we've both and our colleagues have experienced significant healing and transformation that has led us to experience well-being at work and at home through these practices. And you've all got access to sticky notes, so can I just ask you to all make sure you've got some and you've got a pen or something to write with? Because one of the things is, feel free to jot things down, because we will be asking you to harvest and collate those as we go through a bit later on. Did you want to talk to this one, sis?
Sure. And I was just going to say, in terms of that almost 360 view of research being healing and transformative, both for researchers and community members, the same goes for that extractive approach. I think many could maybe relate to that idea of burnout that's come from really unhealthy research practices that have not only been detrimental for community, but also detrimental for the researcher themselves. So that's why we're really wanting to focus on the experiences of community, but also researchers. And sometimes, of course, researchers are community. And why we're wanting to also take this strengths-based approach in terms of thinking about researchers' well-being and researchers' healing. So these are some more ideas that have been shared by our sis Carlie and also Naomi as well, where reciprocal well-being is promoted through research as relationship, research as responsibility. You might start to see some beautiful echoes with the 7 R's that we were seeing before, and that beautiful resonance with the Brydie-Leigh messages that came through. Research as reciprocity. And another one that our dear Uncle Glenn Barry, our elder, always likes to remind us, research is ceremony. People spoke about coming into this space and, it looks different, and there's things to smell and to feel and to be, to bring us into this space, to welcome us in an act of hospitality and to ground us in our bodies and spirits and minds. And that's very much part of thinking about research as ceremony. Research as collective care and growth. And this goes, as we were saying, in a 360 view for both researchers and, of course, communities that we're working with. But also, research comes with responsibility and accountability to country, to community, and to future generations. That's serious business. That's serious business. But of course, research is a living process. It's not just an output. And I think we're all kindred spirits here with how we're talking. But of course, we're also research leaders, and we're part of this university system that speaks about these highly industrialized terms like outputs and impact, which of course is a physical blow of force from a stationary object and something else hitting its speed. If you start to unpack these terms, which we just prattle off our tongues all the time, it maybe isn't quite what we're actually talking about here when we're thinking about it as a living, breathing process that has the ability to be quashed and has the ability to flourish and live and to breathe, and not just an output or a piece of impact or something that gets quantified in a number. And so this is a massive reframing. But I don't think that then means we're not producing quality research. Don't worry, Andres. We're still, I think, producing quality research. We can still actually maybe even bring in a research grant. Naomi talked about the ARC they're working on as well, that does all of these good things but also isn't harming in the process. So I think this is a reframing that's kind of good for all, including healing this university research system, which we can maybe look at as in need of some healing as well.
And I'll just add a little footnote about the researcher's ceremony. There is a great book written by Sean Wilson, and there's a copy of it down the front if you want to have a look in one of the breaks. When I think of researcher's ceremony, it can be small C ceremony, and just a little note that you may already be sensitive to this, but not all First Nations people are going to agree with that wording, because for some of us it's like ceremony is ceremony, and that is restricted, and that is sacred, and that is cultural business. So don't go mixing it up and doing a little hodgepodge job and calling it ceremony. So just, in terms of basic cultural safety, you would have heard this from Kerry Hall if you've done the cultural humility training. I just try to adopt the language and check in on any of those kinds of things with whoever's the cultural authority where we're working, or elders that we're working with. And just be sensitive to that. And sometimes you might get a little bit of tough love, and I've gotten tough love. This is not ceremony, get that out of here. This is not ceremony, so just, again, humility, learning, being open, adapting to who you're working with, I think is always a great idea. Yeah. And then, sometimes there'll be a chance to have a really good discussion. Yeah. So some key ideas, and some of these will be very familiar, but it might be just good to run through them and refresh them and get them up in the air in the room as we move forward. So anyone who's done a good research methods class should know research is never neutral. And this is something Carlie really wanted us to touch on as a community leader and a social worker and someone who works with a big variety of First Nations mob across Australia and elsewhere, just really saying this. In terms of the, we might say Eurocentric is another word, Western, Sandy O'Sullivan says mainstream/white stream, because the mainstream is usually the white stream, at least in countries like this. Research traditions and structures can position research as this objective practice, or at least detached, individualised, extractive, productivity driven. I think that's, in terms of the research environment, that can be a really driving factor. Efficient and professional. And even when, certain disciplines and practices allow the subjective to come in, the personal storytelling, and that there can be hierarchies of knowledge and hierarchies of disciplines that get advantaged and disadvantaged in research ecosystems. And there's a thing with WeAreLeigh's teaching is that both the personal and the professional are incredibly important, and it's really a weird thing for a lot of mob to separate personal from professional. That's, again, there's incredible diversity. We can never assume sameness, always checking in, but for a lot of mob, it's, there's this very blurred line between our personal and professional practices, accountabilities, responsibilities, relationships. And for Carlie, she asked us to really point out, in her experience of Indigenous methodology, she also has a PhD. She's an associate professor at University of Melbourne Honorary and is on 12 national competitive grants at the moment. Maybe she just needed a rest today. All research is relational, whether we acknowledge it or not. The researcher is part of the system and is responsible to the collective, whether we acknowledge it or not. Knowledge has responsibilities attached to it, and they'll often be in projects with mob, as you know, Brydie was right onto when I started working with her, and we've experienced in projects since, is sometimes there'll just be knowledge where the elders will say, that's in scope, that's out of scope, and stay away from that. And then we do a check-in at the end, and sometimes, you know, some restricted stories or songs might have gotten through into the co-created data, and the elders check again and go, that's out. And that, you know, the National Code of Ethics in Australia says we honour that, we must abide by that. It's community decision making. And Anthony's doing a lot of work and a lot of people around Indigenous cultural and intellectual property. So more to come from Griffith on that space to resource us all as well. Research impacts spirit, body, family, community and country in and over time. And that thing that Brydie was talking about intergenerational, like the project planning we did on the weekend in Aotearoa is all Indigenous CIs. And the common thing was we're not just looking like to our children, it's 7 generations ahead. We're looking at how our work might ripple out 7 generations ahead and what is the legacy and the strength that we're picking up from 7 generations behind us. So there's that incredible interconnectedness and that incredible focus on sustainability in every sense of the word. And this is something Brydie and I have talked about a fair bit. We all have skin in the game, pun intended, you know. And if we don't have skin in the game as researchers, you know, I don't mean about getting over involved and getting all, you know, mucking up all community business and relationships like that are too close, but I just mean that we recognise that what we're doing has consequences and impact, and who we are will always affect who we're with and vice versa. Like, we will be affected. Did you want to invite I'll do this one. Okay, so here's where you might want to download some stuff onto sticky notes. So just give you like completion backwards principle idea for how we're going to end the workshop today. We're going to have an unlearning wall of things that in our lived experience, our embodied experience, our emplaced experience of research that you've had to date and that you've witnessed maybe in others here and elsewhere, things that might need to be unlearned if we're going to pursue researchers' wellbeing, but also things that we can contribute to a flourishing wall. Like, if we're going to have a flourishing research ecosystem where everyone has that possibility of experiencing well-being and healing through the conduct of research, what would be happening in that state? So maybe just take, you know, a couple of minutes now to download any thoughts, experiences or examples, tensions. You know, sometimes it's good to get a tension out. If you're feeling a little bit of, just get it out on paper. It's a really safe way to do it. So just invite you to take a few notes, draw something, sing is allowed. Paper, what is it, macrame? Origami. So the question and the reflection is around, the question is not whether research impacts people. It's going to impact people and country now and over time. The question is whether we are accountable for those impacts. So do you feel that that accountability is being practiced at the moment? And if not, what might we need to unlearn? Or if it is happening, how can we bank that and save it for our flourishing wall?
Have we all got pens?
I talk about going slow so often I think I shock people when I rush them, so apologies in advance. Did you want to do this one, please?
Sure. How are we all feeling? I'm watching faces, I'm watching bodies. Are we okay? Is there anything that's burning or bubbling up that you wanted to just maybe ask, or something that you wanted to say after doing that little download, or are you happy for us to just keep moving? Feel free to say it out aloud or just sing. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, when it comes to impact, it's so subjective, and what might be good impact for one person might be bad for somebody else and vice versa.
Yeah.
So when you talk about accountability, you're sort of taking the subjective position, which may be in opposition to the subjectivity of the other position.
Yeah.
So it's really a constant process of questioning rather than the actual conclusion, maybe.
Yeah, that's such an interesting and good point. And you immediately made me think about, you know, in the work that we're doing with First Nations communities, who do I feel accountable for? And almost, it's not a hierarchy, it's not that way, but I know that if I'm working in a community context, I need to listen to elders, I need to listen to those who have the cultural authority, and that will override any other ideas that might, as you say, be a little bit contrary. I'm also, I will constantly be deferring to my First Nations collaborators and chief investigators. If you watch Naomi and I really carefully, you'll notice there's this constant me watching, you know, to look for cues and invitations to make sure that I'm not overstepping. And so I think what I'm trying to say is, in terms of deciding who we're accountable to and for, in these community contexts, there's really nice cultural processes that are in place that you can follow and feel safe and grounded by, rather than you going, I got to figure this all out myself, and I'm seeing contrary things because I've got this community member doing this and that. No, if you're trying to do that on your own, you're up the creek with it. Yeah. And so I think there might be, you know, my response to you is thinking about those cultural structures which we can lean into. Yeah, potentially. But this is an open conversation, so thank you for throwing that into the mix. It actually beautifully relates. Were you reading the slide by any chance, Peter? It beautifully relates to this slide where we're really wanting to speak about research as relational practice, and how we move and how we operate and what we do is very much determined by relationships. And in the little example I was saying here, you know, if Naomi and I are thinking about ourselves in terms of kinship, there are actually responsibilities, and there are ways of relationships working where we have obligations to one another. Actually, if we were in Central Australia, she's my mother, which all the more reason why I need to defer to her. And there are, you know, relationships you need to avoid and all of these sorts of things. So there's actually a beautiful structure and way of being that can really guide our practice. So this is, instead of thinking about participants, term we all use, I use it, I was using it yesterday. Subjects or data collection, where we go in with a backpack and collect a bunch of stuff and then leave. We're really talking about reframing this completely and talking about walking alongside, and like I just said, I do a lot of walking behind. Closely behind, always checking in, but slightly behind. Witnessing, listening, story holding, story caring, not taking. And that relational accountability, like we've sort of been threading through the whole time as well. When you walk into these spaces as a researcher, you have responsibilities then. You're accountable to community. And deep listening, dadiri, which has been evoked beautifully in many different settings and things this week. And Auntie Miriam Rose Ungermeer Bauman's invitation to listen to that deep inner wellspring within ourselves, and then to open that out and listen with others. And in that stillness and in that being together, we then know how to respond and to act and what to do. And this is all, of course, very reciprocal. And that's not just a I give, you give, but it's actually working within much wider reciprocal relationships, which actually go well beyond people, of course, and connect well into country and into place and into the environment that we're working on. And so all of this is really a much more collaborative, relational, co-creational way of doing research. And for those of you who are non-Indigenous allies here like me, I'm first generation migrant, so there ain't no question there. I'm a visitor on this land and a very new visitor on this land. And so I take this role of being a critical ally and accomplice. I like that. I have an inner cheekiness, as Naomi knows, and accomplice actually aligns really nicely with this. But a critical allyship, we've been thinking about allyship with our team. And it's not a label. It's not like this cool badge I wear, like I'm an ally. And it's not a thing I stick in my bio, for heaven's sake. It's a relational practice and it's ongoing. And every day I'm being challenged, often in quiet moments when no one's watching, all the time. Are you going to choose to be an ally? Because it could be so easy to just shut your mouth and not do anything. It's a daily choice that you make, often against the grain. And to me, that is what research is about when we're thinking about it in terms of relational practices, recognising everything I do as a researcher has a knock-on effect in all directions.
Thank you. And everyone who accepted the meeting invitation for today, you have a little PDF handout on key qualities of being an effective ally that is developed by research by Diane Goodman, and I really, really like it. And maybe it resonates for you, maybe it doesn't, and if it does, hang on to it. If it doesn't, let it go. But I use it a lot in my teaching on First Peoples social justice, and it seems to be something people can grab hold of and enact. And it's something that you've developed practice wisdom in over time. Like I used to give it to our second year human services and social work students, and they'd be down at the coffee shop brawling about human rights issues and come back and, it takes time to work out how to do it well, and lots of quiet observation, lots of listening and watching. But I think of myself as an insider ally as well, someone with First Nations heritage that works with really diverse other First Nations people with we all have very different backgrounds. I'm a professor, I have access to stuff, I like to be used, just use me for, and use what I can bring in terms of the university as well.
We realise these are big and heavy questions that need time. So maybe you can pause on the one that you're writing and invite yourself to come back to this later if you want to. That's fine. But we'll give you a second to just finish the sentence that you were writing. So who benefits from this research? Who carries the burden? Who gets healed, if anyone? Who's burnt out and exhausted? Actually, maybe. Woo! Who gets erased? And who gets to wear the nice promotion? We might just pause for a little moment now, because those are big questions, and we have this sense that maybe people might want to share a little bit, or this is a safe space to be honest. I think we kind of look at those questions and a few of us feel a little sheepish. You've got two fat cat professors sitting here, and that can come with some uncomfortable questions sometimes. So we're all relating to them. Does anyone want to share with us something that sort of came up for them in those reflective questions? There's no pressure, there's no right or wrong, just sharing amongst others.
Sorry, me again. I'm so full of stuff, sorry.
So let it out, that's fine.
The first thing I was like, oh my God, who? And I was thinking, what's this who? Like, is this an individual? Is this like everybody? Is this one person or everyone? So then I thought, well, the rest of it is, it's either everyone or nobody. Not one person. To me, in my head, I might be totally wrong, but I thought everyone should benefit. Everyone should share the burden, and nobody should be erased or promoted.
Yeah.
Maybe that's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, not at all. And does anyone else relate to that, what Peter's just shared, in terms of, does it have to be an either or? But I guess the challenge is when we're saying who benefits, benefit is different to different people. And, for an example, we might go to community we've been working with and say, we've done this article and we want to co-author it with you because it's beneficial for you. And they're like, I don't give a shit about your academic article. That's really nice for that purpose. And we're like, no, but we need to, of course, acknowledge authorship and all of that, but it's a completely different benefit that's framed in a very different context. And so benefit is, of course, maybe we're wanting it to benefit all, but it's going to be very different benefits for different purposes. And even asking those questions around what does benefit look like in this community context is the first step maybe in that reciprocal kind of relationship. But I love your thinking there with what you've just shared. Would anyone else like to sort of just add or a different perspective? Sarah, yeah.
I just was thinking that I think when you're talking about who benefits from the research, it's sort of like, I think if you look at it is from like, instead of looking at it as research that's taking something out, it's like you want to develop the community and create something that is sustainable in that community.
Yeah, absolutely. So really resisting that kind of FIFO mentality of flying in, doing stuff and then taking everything back out. But what are you actually generating within that community that stays within the community and sustained by the community? That's a great point. Thanks, Sarah. Love it. Kylie and Jen. Yeah.
I think what really strikes me thinking about these questions is the way in which sort of the university defines research and defines research excellence, etc., is so focused on the researcher claiming everything and the researcher benefiting and the researcher centering themselves always to sort of achieve promotion, and the tension that we then carry in trying to kind of simultaneously deal with that while at the same time wanting to go in the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hearing lots of echoing agreement in terms of that individualism, hero researcher kind of thing. Yeah, and we've all had to really resist that and had moments where we've had to actively tell the university that's not appropriate how you're telling this particular story about this work because you're only singling out me. I know Naomi's had this issue where the rest of my team members that you haven't actually acknowledged. So great point there, Kylie. Thank you. Jen, did you want to add to that?
Bravo, Carlie. I totally agree with that. That's a really big issue that we need to resolve collectively, I think. A lot more discussion, I think, needs to happen about that. But the thing that really got me thinking was erasure. And what does it mean to be erased? To get erased. That's even interesting grammar, isn't it? Get erased by who? Because as a research leader, you might think that you're not erasing people who have been involved in the research by the way you design the project or report on the project, but actually, do you know if you're erasing or not erasing? And I think those conversations need to keep happening over time to determine what that really feels like for people.
Absolutely. Beautiful points. Thank you, Jen. One last one. Yes.
I've got a question about, is the concept then really more not about us as a researcher choosing our subject, but the subject, collaborative, the words even, research or, a lot of the language is very one-sided and then you get another side to it, like influence, you want influence in research, but then it's creating a power imbalance because you want to influence but you want to advocate. So I think I'm getting stuck with some of the language then coming around to even the point where the research started. If we're trying to influence something, did the people we're influencing even ask?
Yeah.
Is kind of where I'm stuck already.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Who generates the beginning of this research? Is it that I've got a great idea here and I'm going to go and find a community that's going to be a convenient place for me to go and ask my research questions and find out the answers and then squirrel away and publish them all and get promoted to professor? Or is it going to be a community actually asking, this is the work that we want done, coming to whoever? Or maybe it's actually somewhere in the middle where people might come together, and this is back to the point about co-design, where we might actually sit together and say we have an interest and you have a strength and interest, and can we work on something that's going to actually be mutually beneficial for all of us? And there might be a sort of a middle ground there in that genesis point. But it's a really good point. Who gets to start things?
Yeah. There's some really good resources at the national level. So in the NH and MRC Code of Ethics that everyone has, and also I really love the IATSIS ethical guidelines. I think they're based on the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and they are crafted by First Nations people. And it's almost like the IATSIS guidelines are a great guideline for designing a project. And, you know, it is about sovereignty and real authentic leadership. And so maybe, you know, refer back to them with a new lens after today. And if you are able to come to the session this afternoon, the speakers will talk a lot about indigenising that entire research life cycle from a national perspective. So those guidelines that I just mentioned, plus we're going to have representatives from an incredible community-run organisation in Central Australia tell us their principles for engaging with their community. So and even if you can't come this afternoon, it'll be recorded. Yeah. Okay, I want to do this one.
Good luck.
So I just want to acknowledge Andreas Neef, who's an absolute legend. All of us who work with Andreas love Andreas. He's been our Dean Research in the Arts Education and Law Group. And as I said at a meeting fairly recently, one of the fiercest advocates and allies for First Nations people and research and knowledges and relationships that I've ever worked with in a university institution. Yes. And a fierce advocate for this series, you know. So I just want to acknowledge Andreas, but one of the continuing conversations Andreas and I have had, and with the other Research Centre and Institute directors and in the AEL leadership group every now and then, is this idea of cultural load that First Nations staff and HDR candidates and community members are holding all the time, whether we realise it or not. And then this differentiation that some Aboriginal controlled organisations at the moment now are making between cultural load that's appropriate for First Nations people to exercise and colonial load. So I just want to run through that a little bit and spend a little bit of time unpacking that, because like people have talked about terminology today, it can be an incredibly useful institutional tool to be able to differentiate. So just before I get into some of the external resources around that, you know, Carlie Atkinson, as I said, she's a social worker, she's a healer, she's developed incredible knowledge in healing intergenerational trauma. And she's also a psychotherapist and all this sort of stuff. So a very incredible, highly evolved human being. And one of the most compassionate and patient people I've ever seen operate. I said to her, how do you do it? And she just said, you do it. So, but she talks about the invisible Indigenous labour, and I just want to run through this just to start to spark our awareness or get us to remember this, maybe for ourselves, maybe what we see in colleagues and our HDR candidates we work with. So there's this constant pull, and I can say everything like this happens to me almost daily as a First Nations staff member, like literally. And there's been studies on quantifying the cultural load or the colonial load. It's like it was quantified at 4 extra hours of work a day. So if that gives you a sense. Translating systems. So being asked to be the Minister for Indigenous Affairs and speak on behalf of all people, whether you're culturally authorised to do so or not. And that can put you in the firing line, in your own communities and with other First Nations colleagues, appropriately, that you might be seen to be doing the wrong thing. Mentoring everyone. Carrying cultural safety. So being responsible to act in appropriate ways and call out other people when it's not happening, and educate people and mentor people and soothe their emotions when they get upset, when someone calls them out. When we used to do teaching, like, we used to say to the students, sometimes you're going to get some tough love, because if someone's been fighting these oppressive systems their whole life and it's literally in their bones and in their cells that they've inherited from their grandmother and their mother, that we're more likely to get certain diseases. We're more likely to experience the need to soothe through substance abuse. We're more likely to have anxiety and depression. Like, if that's literally in your bones and in your cells, and someone is saying, why are you getting upset? You're emotional. There's no place for anger here. Like, sometimes there is going to be a little bit of tough love. So people aren't going to be able to soothe themselves to the point where they can deliver feedback in a very beautiful compliment sandwich, So sometimes, like, while I've been taught by Auntie Judy and others that, it's okay to be angry, we don't direct it at each other, sometimes there'll be a spillover. So I think, we all have a place there to make space for that, to give a little bit of, grace for people, we don't want that happening, but when it does, we're all human, we're going to have little spillovers sometimes. But it shouldn't just be First Nations people necessarily who are preempting that, preventing that, and caring for people if that does happen. Educating entire institutions, and then holding the community expectations as well. Because, there's a conversation that community members will have with other First Nations people that they're not going to have necessarily with others. And like Uncle Goma said quietly to me, where's the data go? In this research, where's the data going? What are your expectations? Just checking that we're up to date on data sovereignty. And so, and as I've said to Cara and Elise Sargent, if these things aren't happening, it's my butt on the line. I will get a kick in the butt personally, and emotional labour, being the bridge, being the mediator, and lateral violence. Sometimes, if you put your head up and try to do things, you get your head chopped off. Because there's so much diversity, so many different disciplines, so much knowledge, and one First Nations person cannot speak for others. And that can put, that can lead to some hard situations as well. But then there's also research burnout, and I think this, like Brydie said earlier, this can happen to anyone. Trauma re-exposure or re-traumatisation, vicarious traumatisation, compassion fatigue, over-consultation of communities. And, you might have heard that the Australian First Nations communities are the most over-researched communities in the entire world. Extractive urgency, there's a timeline for the grant and you have to get it done and you can't wait, and so you might just move to another community or so our, whatever our timelines are, need to account for communities moving in their own timelines. And sometimes the answer is just no, even though the answer might have been yes. The answer can change to no. And so it's having flexibility in our budgets, in our timelines, in our project planning to allow for that. And institutions rewarding outputs over relationships. And I think a lot of people would have had that experience where they're trying to explain, I can't rush that thing, I just can't. And yeah, we have to have that conversation a fair bit. But Windthanga is an organisation, community-controlled organisation, and they've got this, what is this thing called? I don't know, is this, when you have those little pictures on social media? I've never known what it's called. Anyway, it's a thing. So all the design students in QCAD would be able to tell me, I'm sure. But it's a collection of these little resources which I think are just awesome. And you can, if you just Google, you can get your own copy of it from Facebook or whatever and just attribute it. But it's reframing cultural load, because for quite a few years we just talked about cultural load and not colonial load, as in First Nations people are carrying this big cultural load and isn't it a problem, and what are we going to do, and we don't do anything about it. But it's this separating this really cool into cultural responsibility and colonial load, which we can all help carry, the colonial load. So cultural responsibility are the appropriate things that First Nations people are responsible for. Advocating, like relationships, sharing appropriately, knowledges, showing up for community in reciprocity, and doing a good job for ourselves, and then not seeing, this is one of the critiques of cultural load, is it sort of starts to put a deficit lens on cultural responsibility, but it's a strength, that people are still having those dual roles and multiple roles. So when we get to colonial load, they've talked about it as a load placed knowingly and unknowingly on First Nations people by settlers and institutions. So this is not necessarily, this is not about cultural knowledge or cultural affiliations that First Nations staff appropriately are responsible for. This is about all the extra stuff, all the extra labour that comes from our collective inheritance in Australia and other countries, about managing biases, assumptions, expectations and entitlement. It's often highly visible to First Nations people, but it can be invisible to people not part of that community. But it can become visible, I have to say. Like, there is a self-led learning thing, and things just, you go, anyone who's not you, if you can start to understand by listening to their stories or self-educating. The way that a lot of First Nations people have reported experiencing the colonial load is about working in isolation and having to challenge restrictive Western health frameworks, racist and unsafe workplaces, the expectation to educate and mentor and look after others, having our black identity questioned, are you black enough? And that can come from First Nations and non-Indigenous people. Deficit narratives, treating you like a child, talking down to you. All the kinds of things we've talked about before. But the opportunity that's being highlighted here is finding balance and finding a space for collaboration in not only identifying and making visible both cultural load and colonial load, but then sharing the work of it. Yeah, and I think that's, as I said before, that's what we're really deliberately doing in this series with the colleagues across AEL who have overtly, deliberately jumped in, and we're sharing the load. So we're learning as we go as well. So in terms of burnout that some of us might have experienced, compassion fatigue, vicarious traumatisation, this is another one of Carlie's points. She really wanted to convey that burnout is often not an individual failing. Like, if we're feeling that way, burnt out, overwhelmed, unsupported, or, to the point we can't do the work anymore, that's really serious. And it's not an individual's fault, 99% of the time. And Carlie draws attention to the systemic and institutional supports. And what she said is individual burnout is actually often a signal that the systems are consuming more than they're giving back, in terms of support, in terms of training, in terms of scaffolding the work, resourcing the work, and so on. And you can see there, if that's happening to certain minoritised communities, again, we're just putting labour, burden, and challenges back to communities who are already experiencing significant challenge. So the invitation to reflect there is about, in your lived experience, in your embodied experience, in placed experience, what can we unlearn about cultural load, colonial load, and burnout? What can we put on the flourishing wall that might already be working well, that you've experienced, that can help us move toward well-being for everyone in the ecosystem? I just invite you to take a few deep breaths as well, because I can get very passionate when I talk about these topics, and just realise that could have hit your body in a certain way. And one of the things, one of the phrases I always end up using in my research conversations is about structure and flow. Like moving with the flow of country, moving with the flow of communities, having a structure but be willing to let it go. And that's exactly what Brydie and I just did with our workshop. But just want to invite you all to stand up. Well, just your back need to stretch, your wrists need to stretch, your feet. And this is one of the things that in Indigenous ways of working that I've been mentored more and more into, and that I had to vastly unlearn, is just operating from the chin up. Like really have to listen to every resource on offer. And one elder that I talked to about this, he said, if you're doing the wrong thing, you will feel and know you're doing the wrong thing. If you don't stop yourself, once you know you're doing the wrong thing, you will be stopped. Someone will stop you, or your body will stop you, so it was just a really interesting lesson too. So yeah, just one final, whatever you want to do. And now so we've talked through some truths, some key ideas underpinning. We've also talked about some of the wound that might actually need to be healed in research, right? We've talked about cultural load, we've talked about burnout, we've talked about extraction, outputs, frenzied, like productivity and all that stuff. But now we want to re-invite you back into that warm space of what it might feel like if we were all able to and supported to and encourage each other to pursue research as a healing pathway to achieving well-being. So, just a reminder, like we started off with, research can be about collective care. And we have time to develop this. We don't have to walk out today ready to get an ARC and do it all right. We've got time to be mentored around this. And that's what supervision is for. Supervision, mentoring, it's about supporting one another, nurturing ourselves, nurturing the next generations. About yarning, slowing down. There's some black belt yarners out there, and they are here at Griffith, and taking time and just listening and learning. Ceremony, we've talked about. Time on country, and country is everywhere. We're on country now, but it might mean going to a place where you really are connected with the natural environment much more overtly. Community connection, proper connection, not, exchange or token. Not transactional is what I'm trying to say. Rhythm and rest, so listening to those tempos in the body, listening to the tempos around us, reading the field, and being able to slow down. Understanding what the real community priorities are and taking time to find those out. Genuine leadership from communities. This whole series is called First Futures, and it's all about embedding First Nations-led research across the university. So that's really why we're here, is how might we start to do that if we're not doing it already? What does it mean? How do we do it? How can we support each other? And systems healing, like we've both talked a little bit about different elements of the system that we might have felt weren't conducive to this way of working, but there also elements are, and maybe it's about storying those, what's given you a pocket of freedom in your work. Who was there? What did they do? What were the enablers of deeper work for you? And then sharing it back with others, because it's all resourcing.
Please be seated.
Please be seated. Thank you, everyone. And just remembering, well-being is not in opposition to being productive. I think when I'm well and I'm connected and I've got trust and we're using the protocols and we're working, in really highly ethical ways, we are incredibly productive. We get excited, we don't feel restrained, we're not having to have stupid fights over stuff that should already be known. We're not wasting energy on colonial load. We're just going for it. And imagine if we could all be in that situation. It releases creative energy when things are going well, or when protocols are followed. And legend Regina Scarf there, in one of our recent projects, this is something too that, say we go out and we start with this intention to heal ourselves and heal our research, we will become a critical mass. And once you get a critical mass across an institution, then the system can start to change. And it really is, I just hear over and over again in the circles that I move in, change yourself, focus on yourself, do a good job, connect with others to support you, and share. You know, everything from today will be shared, and you can share it onward. And we, over time, a lot of this change is generational. We can do it. So now I'm going to hand back to Brydie.
What we want to do now is give you a moment to process what we've been sharing. We've aimed in this first session to really resource you with ideas, with things to stimulate mind, body, spirit. And we want to give you a moment to sort of process that and kind of integrate it a little bit into how you're thinking about your own research, the projects you might be working on, the collaborators you might be walking alongside. And so we're going to change focus a little bit, and there's going to be less talking from us now. We've given you some resources to work with, and we're going to encourage you now to do a few activities that help to do this processing and integrating. In particular, I want you to start thinking about your own research story and experiences. We've shared a little bit of a glimpse of ours, but it's an opportunity for you to kind of tune in. So we're just going to take a moment to be still, and then we're going to move and get a bunch of colour pencils and things. There's some wet lemon myrtle on the screen right now, which was how I cut it this morning from the garden. And I just invite you to just take a moment before we move now into this next session. And to just, if you want to, let your eyes gaze on an object or something and just let them relax. Or if you want to close your eyes, you're very, very welcome to do that, whatever feels good to you. And I just want you to think about what we've been sharing that resonates with you. What is resonating? What is humming within you? It might be an excited hum, or it might be a slightly unsure hum, but what is resonating with you? And I want you to just do a little body scan and start from the top of your head, and just imagine this warm light going slowly from your head down through your chest, all the way down to your toes. And sense where that resonance is maybe sitting in your body. Are you feeling this in your heart? Maybe in your gut? Just tune into your body and sense where you're feeling it. And I invite you to recognize that feeling. I invite you to acknowledge that feeling. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to say it out aloud, but just acknowledge it. Recognize it. And when you feel like you've done that, you can open your eyes slowly, or shift your gaze when you feel ready. Maybe take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. In through your nose. Now really let it out. Give us some germs. Nice one. Okay. We're going to go through a little bit of a metaphor process now. And this is taking it a little bit further into your own research journey. And I want you to think, if your research journey was a landscape, maybe a weather pattern, a river, or a beautiful tree, a fire or a pathway, what would it look like? And what I want to invite you to do now is to find a way of expressing that feels good to you. So you might be a writer who wants to write. You might want to write words or descriptions. You might be a doodler who wants to maybe express that in a symbol or something. You might be a noise maker. Unfortunately, Vanessa's had to leave, otherwise she might have led a very raucous kind of expression outside. Or maybe you probably might just like to come and grab a piece of paper, move and come and get it, and come and grab some pencils. And we're just going to take 5 minutes of own individual time to work through this metaphor. Now remember, we're trying to carry everything that we've been sharing with you and resourcing you with in the first part. We want you to think about how it might actually relate to your own personal research journey and the people that you're working with and the things that you're trying to achieve. So to take 5 minutes to find a modality that works for you and feels good and comfortable to express what's coming out. So there's a lovely energy in the room. So thank you for going with the flow and being a little creative to sort of reflect a little bit on what we've shared earlier and how it might relate to you. I'm going to ask you to reflect in pairs in a minute, but before we break into pairs, I want you to just look at whatever you've created. It might be words, it might be an image. And I want you to ask yourself, what does this reflect about me as a researcher? What does this reflect about me as a researcher? And what does this reflect about this moment right here, right now in time, about how I'm thinking and feeling about research? You can look at the image you've created, or maybe you just felt, I don't want to do an image, and maybe that's also really interesting to reflect on as well. That would be just fine. What does it reflect about you? And then I want you to look at your image or think about the words you've written, or maybe just the blank page that's in front of you, but you're holding a lot within your body. And I want you to say to yourself, what are the conditions that would make this image I've created flourish? What are the things that would nourish this image that I have imagined here for how I do my research? And then you might also turn to what we think of as the shadow. What are the conditions that restrict, that restrain, that drain this image from flourishing? And I want you to just hold those prompts and maybe turn to the person next to you. We'll keep this nice and intimate for the moment. And just share what you feel comfortable with. Ask them about their image, or maybe their blank page, or maybe something else that they might have created. And ask them to talk and story you through what you've created. So we're going to spend in pairs. Just turn to the person closest to you for the next 5 minutes to just reflect and to share and to think about those questions I've just said. What does this reveal about you as a researcher, this moment in time? What conditions allow it to flourish, and what conditions constrain it? So take a few minutes to have a nice little yarn to the person next to you. Okay. I know we want to keep talking, we want to keep yarning, we want to keep that beautiful energy flowing. What we're going to do now is we're going to bring that energy that we've created into our circle here. You've probably been watching this circle, this significant gathering place that we've created with all sorts of special things and energy. And what I want to invite you to do is to bring whatever you've drawn, created, written, down to the front. We're all just going to gather and then we're going to place it in, and we're going to bring this energy collectively together. If you feel comfortable, can you just come down the front for a moment and bring whatever you've written or drawn? Can be messy, doesn't matter. Bring it down. Just wait. Hang on a sec. Okay, just wait 1 sec. We're all just going to gather together. For those who feel comfortable. And we recognise that we're all actually holding a lot of things. I said to Naomi last night when all the rain was coming, I'm like, whoa, sis, this is big Napa energy. Napa in Welpre is the word for water and rain. I said, I'm going to bring the tissues because I just sense there's going to be some releasing here. And that's, we acknowledge that, we feel that, we sense that, that's wonderful. And so to kind of acknowledge what you've written there, what you've drawn there, and to recognise it, but to actually just put it down into the care of this collective circle without feeling we need to solve it, fix it, get it all right, get it ready for an output. We're going to encourage you to go around the circle and just use one word to describe what you've drawn. And then you can place it into the circle. You can give it to the collective care of this group to hold, to acknowledge and to recognise. So we've got a really beautiful, perfect circle here. So we might just kind of go in a
Try to not have you back to anyone.
Yeah.
So if we can spread out a little bit.
Yep. Right. Okay, Andreas, our fierce leader, would you like to kick us off with your one word and then we'll go around?
That's a hard one because I didn't even draw anything. But I conceive of my research as a colorful flower meadow from which I pick those beautiful flowers and put them into a bouquet of flowers.
Beautiful.
So I'm still extractive in my research, but I hope to be less extractive in the future.
Thank you, Andreas. A beautiful start. Thank you. We'll go around here.
Plants.
Plants. Beautiful.
I'm on a beach.
Oh, sweet. Can I keep that?
I'm on a beach too because I find them places of endless exploration.
Beautiful.
I'm on fire.
Mm.
River of humility. I'm a mountain of contradictions.
Oh, amen.
We could do
Emptiness.
Oh.
Because my research is about emptiness.
Wow.
Beautiful. Beginner's mind.
I'm a pathway in a burned down forest.
Nice. Yes.
Goosebumps.
I'm a messy delta.
Oh.
A gift from the desert.
Let's see.
I'm a book.
Mm.
All works.
You made it out.
I'm on a walk in the bush.
Beautiful.
An up and down journey.
Mm.
Heron in the swamp.
Ooh.
Tension/balance.
Beautiful.
Two parts diverging.
Ooh. Nice one.
Free of gravity.
Ooh.
And a term of origami plane.
Mm.
A commune of colour and brambles.
Beautiful.
Apprehension and anticipation.
Mess.
Love it.
Interconnectedness.
Beautiful.
Mulch.
Yes, beautiful. Well, let's just take a moment to acknowledge that beautiful resource of awesomeness and humility and creativity and strength that we've collectively acknowledged and represented there. Thanks, everyone. Sis.
Thank you, everyone. And now we're going to keep the moving going. And you know how I was saying sticky note about flourishing and things to unlearn? It's now time to harvest those and contribute those. So if you can go back to wherever you were and pick up the sticky notes, we're going to collate collage our flourishing wall and our unlearning wall. So what we propose is flourishing wall is over here, so all around that sign that says community leadership and participation from end to end. Can you please just put your flourishing sticky notes up there? And sis, where do you want the unlearning? On that wall there? Downstairs? Yeah.
All up on the stands.
The one that says the right to control and own, if you could put your unlearning wall sticky notes there and then congregate back here again, please. And you can do that fairly quietly and thoughtfully. Just deep breathing, go back, sticky note, flourishing, unlearning, and then we'll join the two together. All right.
Thank you. Feel free to take a seat, and we're going to just echo back to you what you've shared with us on our two walls.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to call out to you some of the things that are on the unlearning wall. See if these resonate with you. Burnout is normal. Hierarchy, status and expertise. Rush, anxiety. Expectations for outcomes. The researcher is the expert. There's a little illustration. I don't know what it means. It looks like a coffee cup. Burden, exhaustion, burnout, university processes and structures, fear to ask and fear to be told. We need to unlearn this dominant idea about what work is. We are not accountable for our impacts, but wish to count and harp about them. There are actually quite a few around accountability there, as well as a big motif that everyone's saying we need to think about and maybe unlearn and relearn new ways. What's happening in the flourishing spaces?
Thank you, Bridie. So flourishing, we've got having the space and time to do deep work, co-design, being a part of the them. A completely different approach to what I have conditioned myself into. Wow. Vulnerable empowerment, shared weight, and need constant mutual check-ins. Research as partners. That's interesting. Thinking in common, slow to create space for listening and reflection. Burnout, and then they've got slow scholarship and relationship building isn't rewarded in academia, so maybe in the flourishing wall it is. Slow scholarship is rewarded. And this is great, like flourishing is not just daisies and sunlight, right? You know, flourishing has all shades, and it still has tension, but you know, we feel able to work with the tension. And we feel, more importantly, we feel supported too. We're not on our own, in my view. And someone's put here, needing to learn that it's okay to feel discomfort and pushback, and it's a side of humility with potential for learning. And anytime we're getting pushback, someone is exercising agency. And if that person is from a community partner, that is one of the best possible things that can happen, you know. Feeling the exercise of sovereign people exercising their agency is one of the absolute highlights of my career. Thank you, legends. So we've harvested some incredible stuff, and that's another thing that I've been taught. We already know. We actually just need to come back home and listen to what we already know. And we can learn on top of that and theorise and resource ourselves, but we already know a lot of this stuff. So our collective final task is how do we bridge from the unlearning wall to the wall of flourishing? In some ways we might already kind of be there. It's like a multiple universe thing. Time is spiraling, like it's not linear. Maybe we're in both places at one time, but what are the enablers? What are the concrete actions? What's in your sphere of power? And remember what I said at the start about my beautiful colleague who said, if this isn't another talk fest, I don't want to be part of it. But if this is about genuine action planning, about where we want to be in 12 months and 24 months, I'm all in. So with that in mind, if we're all in, what are the concrete action steps, enablers, things within our spheres of power that we can add? And I wonder if we just invite people to do a final conga line and write it straight onto the board themselves.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, conga line time, people. Can we start with the front row? And it's like graduation, remember? Like once your row before you finishes, the next row stands up, and just all come through, and in your own way, we've got all colours. Please just write your contributions to what's on this bridge. Who's there? What are we doing? How does it feel? How do we get from the wall of unlearning to sit stably and sustainably in the space of flourishing? And if you've got sticky notes left, you might want to write on sticky notes and just bring those up too.
Alrighty. So, I don't know about you all, but the last 2 hours for me have been, I feel like I've been holding my breath more and more and more for 2 hours, and I think I'm going to go outside and have a bit of a breather and connect back to country. So I invite you to do that, particularly, again, like myself, it's been quite an emotional 2 hours. So maybe before you get something to eat or during having something to eat, just reconnect back with country. And whether it's raining or not, you'll only dry. Some people get wet, some people feel the rain. So I invite you to feel the rain. So just wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for holding our hands a little bit today as well. And I acknowledge you've taken on a bit of colonial load today, every single time you do this. So thank you, Naomi. Holding hands, we learn a little bit about transformative research and design. That's a really easy thing to say, but it's a really tricky thing to do. How important is terminology? How important is language? And that's easier to do. So even if we start there, thinking about our language and our terminology. A great tool, IATSIS, really, really good. AITSIS, for those who don't know. Look it up and have that maybe as your starting base for a research framework. Cultural responsibility, colonial loads. Let's start sharing that more if we can, in any little way we can. Honour the cultural responsibility, share the culture, share the colonial load. Nothing about us without us. Next steps for me, I'm going to talk more and more to my First Nations communities that I work with and see how we can keep working on that journey where I feel my humility can grow and really improve on how I do things as well. So thank you again. Enjoy lunch, take a breath, and we're back here at
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Thank you.